Welcome to AB Decodes. I'm Arjun Bhagat, and today we are talking about the situation in Nepal. And as you know, there has been a huge political firestorm in Nepal. The government of KP Oli has been changed, and that has been led by Gen Z. People who are between the age of 18 and 30, though the definition is slightly wider. And the reason for that was the anger that has been brewing because of corruption, because of non-accountability. And the trigger point was, of course, when social media was stopped by the government on the 4th of September. So what happened was these young people started protesting in one of the main squares of Kathmandu. They walked towards the parliament, and then there was a confrontation between the security forces. The police fired upon the protesters, and then all hell broke loose. To really understand the situation there, what led to it, what is the role of different political parties, what does the Gen Z really want, and also about the interim Prime Minister, who was the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Nepal. And of course, there was a lot of destruction. National heritage properties were destroyed. Kathmandu Post says about $21 billion, which is about half the amount of the GDP of Nepal, has been destroyed, not only in Kathmandu, across Nepal, where 300 different government offices have been destroyed. And so to understand this, we are going to be talking to Yubraj Ghimire. He's one of the foremost political analysts of Nepal, a senior journalist, somebody I've been talking to quite a lot in the last 6 months. And he has been, if you look at the earlier podcasts of mine with him, and we'll put a link of that both right now as well as later, he's been warning of a situation going out of hand in Nepal due to the prevalent insensitivity of the government, which is now no longer there. KP Oli has had to resign, and also the huge scale of unemployment, which is about 13% or 14% in Nepal, and also large-scale corruption. So do check out this podcast with Yubraj Ghimire, someone who really clarifies and makes you understand what's going on in Nepal. And so let's start this interview. So today we have Yubraj Ghimire with us, political commentator and one of the finest journalists of Nepal, senior journalist. Thank you so much for joining me, sir. Of course, you know, events in Nepal have moved fast and furious, just like the Gen Z. So many things happened so quickly, so much of loss of life, so much of destruction, a political setup which has been turned on its head. You know, just give our viewers a sense of what happened in Nepal in the last few days, and what is this Gen Z movement really about?
Well, let's begin with that. Gen Z movement was a movement, a symbolic movement to protest against what we call transparent corruption in Nepal, corruption in high places. It was supposed to be a symbolic protest procession, but I think, when they entered, some people say they were instigated to enter parliament houses. The government intervened or retaliated in a manner that was neither justified nor, expected. People lost their life, and this created a fury among fellow protesters. The fury of people below 30, it's different from routine political protests in Nepal, which are led by people who are above 60, 70, even 80. So that one. But when things appear to be going out of hand, police, used force in an unprecedented scale, then this was time perhaps anti-social elements from different groupings, maybe vested interest. It didn't take longer for them to get organized and take control of the situation. Also, in Nepal, we really don't have the estimate of the extent of damage of physical property already. I mean, 72 youths have been killed
Yes.
in the security forces firing.
Very
More
unfortunate.
than more than 400 uh, people are still wounded. Some of them in critical conditions. Red Cross blood banks are absolutely, without blood, and there is a huge queue of young people going to donate the blood in wherever, like they collect it. The one, the damage of the property going by, insurance companies. So far, it's about 3,000 crore, but that is only about the properties insured. But I spoke to a industrialist today. Can you give an estimate? He says it has to be at least 10,000 crores, like worth, but it could be more also. So
Was reading by the Kathmandu Times, which even the BBC has quoted, saying that nearly $21 billion worth of state properties have also been destroyed. Now, whatever that may be, but
yeah,
it's a huge loss to
yeah.
Nepal. I mean, you have institutions that have been destroyed, whether it's the parliament, whether it's the Supreme Court, whether it's the secretariat. But before we get into this aspect of it, sir, I wanted to ask you what led to it. I mean, of course, we'd done a podcast 5 months back in which the first thing that you said in that was that, look, the corruption has become so widespread, and the politicians and the bureaucracy are so insensitive to the situation at hand. And you said at sooner and later, it might blow up. And that's exactly what we've seen. So the catalyst in some ways was social media, when the government put a ban on it, on the ostensible reason that these companies needed to comply with government norms. But how did, what are, say, two or three of the main factors that you think actually led to this anger erupting?
Well, one was definitely that widespread corruption. Two, it was ban on that social media, because social media was not only a forum for all age group, including the Gen Z group, to articulate to vent out their anger, protest, and all that, but it was also a platform for their business, like idea, because it's also an IT generation. They're doing so many things through these platforms, and this with the ban on social media, they had this opportunity, self employment or whatever you can call, was snatched away from them. And third, there are a lot of problems arising for Nepalese students, like any other South Asian countries, youths and students to remain in the US. They are, like being sent back and all that. That situation has led to Nepalese youth and students to try to create a congenial atmosphere for their secure future in their country, which they were trying. But the government's ban on social media really angered, and that, I think, is the instant provocation that led to this protest. And when they went to the street, there's excessive use of force and killing of so many youths that led to the current situation.
So, sir, if we look at the government's actions, what were they getting insecure about? I mean, the ban on social media is obviously because there was a lot of criticism of the government which was taking place. So, was it to actually stop this conversation taking place about corruption and the accountability of politicians and the government?
Yes, these governments were not functioning at all, with any, even the minimal degree of accountability. And there was absolute lack of sensitivity towards the demand these youths raised. So, and third, like, although it was a government of Nepali Congress and UML coalition, but even the Maoists, all the parties considered as forces belonging to the current establishment, were the kind of target of anger of the youth population. But then after that, I think the anti-social elements, criminals, again, in Nepal's politics, somehow violence as instrument of political change has got legitimacy. because Maoists were never held accountable to, insurgency and result in killing of 17,000 people in 10 years. So, this culture and legitimacy of that violence has got Nepal was also one reason. But there is a very bizarre kind of response, even at the, even when criminals took over, like people, Prachanda's house and all top Maoist leaders, KP Oli's house and all top UML leaders, including people close, associated with him, Nepali Congress leaders Deuba and people associated to him, and also the monarchists, they were attacked. So basically, they also perhaps wanted to demoralize the political setup of all hues, so that like anarchy prevails and will continue to rule or plunder the private and public property. And also, Genji, I do sense that there was some degree of naivety among the Genji, protesters about politics, but they clearly wanted scientific approach that government adopted and all that. And they destroyed the national property and so rich architect and all that. So anyone with national interest and growth, economic growth of the society and growth of, like IT culture would have done this. So this is another major responsibility of the government and political parties to find out who actually ruled the roost after, like when Genji protest was on, although, they were soaked in blood and being rushed to the hospitals.
Yeah, I think, once a protest goes out of hands, then a lot of things just, a lot of, as you said, unscrupulous elements, then start taking advantage of the situation. I've seen a lot of videos of things being looted, people walking off with things from the parliament. I mean, it was just very sad to see. But, I wanted to ask you, what are the aspirations of Gen Z now? What do they want now? It's also very unique because here was a protest which became a fireball, and the whole government setup has been put on its head, has been changed. There is no leader per se. Of course, now you have Balen Shah's name coming up, and in the future as a potential prime minister. But there is no leader. So how do you actually put things together? Of course, they're saying corruption. We want to fight. We want better governance. We want to fight against corruption. We want more employment opportunities. As you said, and you're right about it, that there seems to be a lot of idealism, and which is what the youth is about, and I think that's wonderful. But how do you then transform the country overnight? You have a political system, and you have three major political parties which have been doing the merry-go-round, or musical chairs with prime ministerships. And then you have a bureaucracy. A large part of corruption in any setup, as you know very well, is that the bureaucracy. Politicians may come and go, but the bureaucrats, the police is not going to change, sir.
Obviously, after 2006 political change, radical changes, people were expecting that there won't be corruption because that was the collective place of the political parties who controlled the system after that, that, like, will never indulge in corruption and, like, there will be total consolidation of democracy, meaning there will be a system of accountability in place. And but instead of transforming the society, as you said, and as they had placed, they became party to the acceleration of corruption, politicizing bureaucracy, and also using bureaucracy for their personal gains, financial and other. So this unfortunately was the tragedy. So when Genji came, I don't think they had a very clear political road map for this anti-corruption thing. But they said you stop corruption and you lift the ban and you remove the inequality. Their perception more than like a clear agenda. And I don't think they protested to change the government and take the lead themselves. That is not going to happen because they don't have a formal structure yet. They don't have a formal leadership. And that probably was one reason why all that happened, because nobody takes the responsibility or blame for this now. But at least political parties are appreciating the fact and giving benefit of doubt to Gen Zs that they didn't, like get into this mayhem and plunder. But now we have Sushila Karki, a former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, as the head of the government, with three very, two people at least. They have with proven ability in when they worked as bureaucrats in the past. Another person is from NGO. He's an advocate. He's the Home Minister and someone who was legal advisor to Balen Shah, perceived as kingmaker. And all that they are saying is we'll respect the anti-corruption, uh, spirit of Gen Z, but we have to watch. It's easier said than easier said than done. We'll see whether it is yet to be seen whether they will implement this anti-corruption thing and all that. Whether they will hold. Prime Minister has announced that they will go into they will probe this corruption in high places. The other thing is how political parties, the main three political parties, will behave. The three top leaders have not yet responded to, building up demand within their respective parties. They should retire from public life at least now, so that political parties get some kind of respect in the esteem of the people. They haven't done it yet. But the problem with the government is, although political parties uh, political parties were not ready for dissolving the parliament. They protested it. They are saying it's unconstitutional. They might be challenging it in the court. The international community has recognized the government, but we don't know it. We don't see domestic political parties endorsing and accepting the legitimacy of the government. That's going to be a problem. Because if this is for democracy, democracy needs larger pursuit and endorsement. Now, in 2016, Nepal's new political actors excluded monarchy and traditional forces from the peace process and the political process. Eight parties took the monopoly, over the system. Now that eight parties are also excluded, there's no party backing the current, yes, a movement, Gen Z is supporting it. But in the time of crisis, when the country needs to find a new destination, they have to prepare a roadmap. That roadmap has to be endorsed by consensus at least, or larger understanding of the political forces. Unfortunately, that is missing. And my fear is, in absence of the all sides political consensus pursuing that or endorsing that, this will, no, not go anywhere.
Right. So, let's just very briefly talk about Balen Shah, who is the mayor of Kathmandu. He ran as an independent and he won. He's an engineer by profession. Gen Z seems to be taking his name a lot. He's not part of the interim government because I guess maybe he and his supporters are thinking of the long term. Tell us a little bit about him. Who is he? Does he have that capability? Will he have a constituency, outside Kathmandu, and also outside that 30, 18 to 30 year age gap?
Well, it seems from what we know of him, his father moved to Kathmandu from Taraya Ayurved doctor who is, who worked in a government Ayurved, research center. And he was born, he grew up and got educated in Kathmandu. Then he has a huge friend cycle. He was a rapper. He is still occasionally, he mixed up well with the Kathmandu circle, and also he was very enamored of the Kathmandu's culture, architect, and all that. So he studied this structural engineering in Bangalore, and the one evidence that we have he had certain interest in politics was when the previous mayoral election took place in Kathmandu. Apparently, wrote in his Facebook that I didn't vote. I'll be contesting myself next time. That time, that way. So, but nobody knew whether, how serious he was. He contested, and it was unique and rare that someone would migrated from Tarai own in Kathmandu, a city for its cultural, distinctness and all that. He other thing is he's a man of few words. He won his
Though
independence.
he's a
They,
rapper, but a man of
yeah,
few
rap,
words. A
yeah,
contradiction in terms, yeah.
yeah, and also he defeated two very established political figures. One was former Mayor Kesav Stabit from UML. Other was Sirzana Singh, the daughter-in-law of Ganesman Singh, political giant in Nepal. So his recognition definitely was established, and he did something only political line that we can guess. He was very anti-Wali. He took a very clearly anti-Wali stance, but his political lines are not defined otherwise. So he's not perhaps exposed as as other politician. He is a man of few words. But the other thing is, after he contested and won the election in Kathmandu, he's become a big name, and he is cited as a role model along with two other young and non-party independent mayors. One is Harka Sampang from eastern Nepal's Dharam, and another is Gopi Hamal from western Nepal's Tangadi. They all won the key mayoral constituency apparently because the political parties, wherever people have got young, dynamic figures with potential, they have rejected the big political parties and elected the new one. So Balen is, in that race.
So, of course, the interim Prime Minister, Sushila ji, she has a very tough task cut out, and she seems to have been very clear that the next elections are going to be on the 5th of March. That doesn't give the country much time, which means that if a new political party has to come under Balen Shah and others, they will have to form it very quickly if they want to fight the elections. But as a political analyst and someone who's seen this whole evolution of democracy in Nepal, of course, we've seen the same kind of politics in India as well. Interim, very short-lived governments, and whenever that has happened, that's given India a lot of instability.
Right.
And that happened in the 90s.
Early
You've
90s,
known
yes. Yeah.
this entire history. I was reading somewhere and I was talking to some Nepali experts. They were saying, maybe we should look at a presidential form of government where at least the person who's in charge and his political party, like the American system, they may be able to govern properly if they have defined terms rather than 6 months, 1 year. I think KP Oli has become prime minister 3 times. Prachanda has become a number of times. Sher Bahadur. All these politicians have been playing musical chairs. It has not given stability to the country to actually, then grow, have a vision. Is that something a part of the discourse in Nepal right now?
Well, never serious discourse. Political leaders, come out with ideas um, according to what they think suits it. Supposing we had presidential form of government in KP Wali was at one time very popular leader was the president. He would not have run away or quit this time. He would have used, yeah, he would have used all his powers to suppress the movement further. Even today, he hasn't apologized, for so much loss of blood and life. So what I'm saying is, you would need to in Nepal. Also, it's very different from rest of democracy or political system in South Asia. It was let's say 78 years ago when Nepal had one constitutional advisory group from India led by Sri Prakash. he became governor, and he was a like expert on legal thing. He came suggesting the first. From that time to now, in 78 years, we have seen 7 constitutions come and go. Average lifespan of each constitution in the system aligned with that constitution would be 8 years. The point is, what leaders do here is when they fail, they put the blame on the constitution and the system. They don't take accountability for their failure and they don't own it up. So that's the entire problem. So if we don't have any leadership with a culture of self introspection and accountability, any system is bound to fail if the failure of that particular leadership is considered to be failure.
Right. No, you're
So we really
absolutely right.
don't,
Yeah.
yeah. But this could have been an opportunity, like the period between 2006 and 2015 when Nepal promulgated that constitution could have been a good timing and opportunity to discuss this issue. But unfortunately, you know what? The two constituent assembly, one lived for 4 years, another 2 years. Not a single amendment was, allowed to be moved. 8 leaders, in consultation with some NGOs and external experts, came to a conclusion about what should be the constitution like. It was drafted outside and it was put in the house and not allowing anyone to raise any objection or move any amendment. They were asked to raise hands and it was adopted. So we knew that it was not going to be functional. Despite any shortcomings in the constitution, if the leaders had become accountable and like if they were interested in delivery and if they're sensitive towards corruption and sensitive about the youth mind not accepting that kind of culture, this situation would not have come today.
So, I have two last questions for you. One is about the role of the army. The army stepped in maybe 24 hours later. Maybe in some of the more sensitive areas, they stepped in earlier. But pretty much a lot of Kathmandu had burnt, at least the institutional areas by then. The army has played a very, how would you say, um, in some ways a responsible role where they've not said we're taking over or anything. They've helped install an interim government in place. How do you see the role of the army in the future, given that we're not sure about instability in Nepal at this point of time?
Yeah, Arjun, like one about the present role, why army didn't intervene. There is lot for the army to answer. Why didn't they step in when all this was going to happen? They could have saved a lot of public property and all that. That is for them to answer. But my own assessment is in the past 19 years after 2006 change, there is tremendous trust deficit between the army and current political dispensation. They projected army along with UN agencies like Amin and all that as being the private army of the king. Last 5 years, second half of the decade-long insurgency led by Maoists, army had been attacked, their posts overrun. But when the peace process began in, in Maoist leaders were indulging in that kind of violence, human rights cases, violation cases, were in the cabinet. They occupied key posts, but Maoists were punished unilaterally. Sorry, army was punished unilaterally. Holding the responsible, removing from the service, and all that. So, and even now, there was no proper order as defined in the constitution was given to the army. So it became and obviously there would be fear. Supposing army had resorted to some kind of use of force, then and if the government had survived, like in the past, the political leadership may not have own responsibility. Army would have been blamed for that. That probably is the reason why
So they were
I think army
so they
was.
were hesitant, and
Yeah,
in
yeah.
some ways, I don't
But
know, I would
but
blame the army, but yeah, I mean, one would have liked them to at least protect the main, institutions
yeah,
of the
yeah.
government.
But I think army faces much bigger challenge now that it has stepped in, although it hasn't taken direct leadership, but it has been facilitating, in dialogue process, dialogue among the supporters of the current, like change. Political parties are not involved, traditional forces are not involved, monarchical forces are not involved in that. But if this doesn't move further, if this doesn't succeed, army may get a substantial part of the blame, or they may be seen as failure. That would be more tragic things to happen.
Right, because that's one institution that is actually holding, I think, the entire setup together, and it's very early days. My last question, I've taken enough of your time, is how do you see the three main political parties? I'm calling it three, but of course how do you see them reacting in the next few days? Whether it is the Congress, whether it is the Maoists or the CPM.
Yeah. Well, I think they need to retain their whatever residual credibility and some degree of people's faith. That the first thing I think to happen for that is three leaders, Deuba, Oli, and Prachanda, retiring from public
But
life.
you actually see that happening.
No, I don't. If they don't do it, their parties would be discredited. Their parties would be seen as insensitive towards, the loss of life, the trail of destructions, and all that. So that is one. Two, after that, they have to define, that you cannot move out of the transition by forming smaller groups. You have to bring all, including monarchical and traditional forces and these parties together, along with Gen Z group, which now are the revolutionaries, together and find a way out together. If that doesn't happen, this government won't get the legitimacy. All the international community has, recognized it. There's support. That's not enough. Domestic endorsement has to be there. That's
So
absolutely
that's the
lacking.
key, you're
But
saying, in
yeah,
domestic endorsement, so
yeah,
that then the country can then move ahead.
yes, yes,
And the
yes.
danger is that if the political parties, the main political parties, do not come into this discourse, then of course there'll be many hurdles for the new interim
There
and the
will be
future
many.
governments.
Yeah, yes, yes. That's what.
Right, right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for giving us a good idea of what's happening. I hope things settle down. We love Nepal and everybody there. And it was very sad to see the situation as it had erupted. But as you said, it was something that was brewing for a long time, and the political masters, so-called political masters, were just ignoring the entire situation, the disparity, the unemployment, huge number of people moving abroad, and I hope that things settle down and Gen Z gets what it deserves, which is a clean government, um, and I mean that's all one can say. Thank you, Yubraj, for spending time with us on AB Decodes and giving us clarity on the situation in Nepal and about the Gen Z movement, and also what the future holds as far as Nepal and its political discourse is concerned. So, thank you so much for watching AB Decodes. If you like this podcast, do share it as well as subscribe to it, where we talk about a lot of geopolitical events in the world as well as in South Asia. This is Arjun Bhagat signing off.